Hello class and welcome to week 1 of General Psychology. I'm so excited to get started with this course. I hope you guys had an amazing holiday. I know it's probably much different than what you're used to, but I'm hoping you had a great holiday and a happy new year. I really want to start this new year off right with a great course. I really enjoy General Psychology because number one, it's where I first gained my love for psychology, and I hope that shows throughout the course and my lecture videos. I know we just finished up our last course, but I think that the couple weeks in between will give you a much needed break to start the new year off right. So let's jump right in. This lecture video will serve the purpose as to number one, introducing myself, as well as going over your week 1 activities and a brief overview of this week's material. What I typically like to do is focus on key areas of focus in terms of your weekly assignments. And I don't like to spend too much on the lecture video, so you'll see probably lecture videos no more than 25 minutes. I try to keep it short for you guys because I know you have a lot of work to do. You have a lot of things to read, so I want to make sure that I'm touching on the key points that you need to touch on. And you'll get the rest through your readings and things like that. If you're needing a more in-depth analysis of the material, I can provide that as well. But for right now, I think I want to focus on, of course, maintaining that short videos and reaching you in the best way possible within that short amount of time. So for this week, you have, of course, you have some reading to complete. First, you'll have to read chapters 1 and 2 of the textbook, and make sure you guys have picked up your textbook. Also, if you have not yet, please complete the SRA agreement. That allows you to, of course, view all the material in the course, watch these lecture videos and things like that. So that is very important. If you have not completed that, you will not be able to submit or complete any of the work in this course. So that has to be done. And also, I do want to mention, I do tend to say quite a bit of ums in my lecture videos. I'm really working on it. So I hope that doesn't detract from the message that I'm teaching you guys. So this is a textbook, of course. You guys should already have that. You'll need to read chapters 1 and 2. You have quite a few videos to watch. These are just quick, brief videos on components for this week. I like to implement crash course videos because they're quick, to the point, and they have so many great resources and such a great material that is provided through Crash Course. You also have a video on Can Psychology Be Christian, which is an important component considering we are at Cal Baptist, and you'll have to incorporate those faith components throughout the course. Whether you believe you're Christian, Baptist, Catholic, you all should be trying to incorporate some type of faith or beliefs throughout your work. Even if you don't plan to pursue a degree or pursue something in terms of like counseling and have it be faith-based practice, it's important to recognize the different components of faith when we're speaking in terms of psychology and how that may impact possible clients in the future if you do plan to pursue that degree in counseling. And you have one last website review, and it's over the brain and nervous system, and that's in chapter 2. This lecture video, I'll focus mainly on chapter 1. Like I said, it's just a brief overview, so I don't want to touch on too many things. You'll have a discussion board this week, which will be due on Sunday at midnight. You will have to respond to 2 of your classmates, and the initial post, the main post, should be 250 words or more, and your responses to your classmates should be 50 words or more. And make it a point to try to incorporate, maybe sources in your discussion board post, and elaborate more within your classmates instead of saying, I agree with you, you make a good point, etc. Try to really dive into what your classmate is saying and sources and resources and things that back up those specific points that you make. And lastly, you'll have a project 1. I will include an APA formatted paper. I'm not sure when that will be, but if you guys need that, I can include that just so you have an idea of what I'm looking for in terms of APA format, because with psychology, APA format is a major component. So I'm needing you guys to be on track with that. So the first project is about neuroscience's most famous patients. So this assignment will focus on Phineas Gage. Sorry, that slipped my mind. And it's a PowerPoint presentation. So this is where you'll be able to include graphics and produce a project that is visually appealing yet has substantial information about the material. So the presentation is about Phineas Gage, and he was a well-known, I guess not patient, but he was a well-known figure within the psychology community because he had an accident, and his brain injury was quite famous, and so where a metal rod went through his brain. And so scientists and psychologists and philosophers are trying to figure out the impact that this major brain injury had on his behavior, his psyche, and basically what changes occurred with damage to the specific part of his brain. It's such an interesting story, and it just speaks to how, trauma has an impact on who we are as people, and I think that it speaks to not just brain injuries, but specifically in trauma in general. When people experience traumatic experiences, their viewpoint, their psyche, their personality may change in a specific way, and I think that it's important to note that these components affect us in many ways. So in order to move forward, we have to address our trauma. We have to recognize how the impact that it has on our lives and what we can do to move forward and bridge the gap between creating a better you. So I think this is a really important assignment. So for this assignment, you'll, of course, like I said, you'll include your pictures and illustrations to enhance the look of the presentation. You'll also follow APA guidelines. So what I mean by that is you'll have your presentation. When you're citing your work on your assignment, you need to either cite it within the text of your assignment or at the bottom of the PowerPoint slide. And if you need more examples of that, I can provide that as well. But be sure to always cite your every single slide with your material, because it's so easy to be able to be labeled as plagiarism when it comes to PowerPoint presentations because of the lack of citation. So make sure that you're doing that. The presentation should include in-text citations. You are responsible for having appropriate sources. So what I mean by that is Wikipedia is not allowed in terms of APA citation. It is not considered a reliable source because anybody can go on a Wikipedia page and change the information on it, so it's not reliable. So your main source of information should be with scholarly articles, the textbook, academic journal articles, and things like that. And you can find that through the library. You can also find that through Google Scholar if you type in traumatic brain injuries impact on psychology, and articles will come up, and you'll have that as a reference. So this presentation is the opener to your beginning understanding of specifically what trauma and the brain consists of. So I'm going to, okay, and one more thing, the presentation should be 10 slides long. And what I mean by that is it should be a minimum of 12 slides. So your information, your title page is 1 slide, the body of your work is your 10, and then you have your reference page. And that's, so it should be a minimum of 12 slides. So let me see if there's anything else I want to talk about in terms of that. And you should have a rubric. Let me double check. Yes, you do have a rubric. So if you have any questions specifically on what you should be meeting, this rubric will tell you specifically what I'm looking for. And you'll see here the actual injury. Presentation clearly explains Gage's actual head injury, including the following circumstances of the incident, the location of the rod through the brain, what effects the injury had on his life, what effects the injury had on his behavior. So those should be specific slides discussing the actual injury. Then you'll create an alternate injury. And that means, say for instance, the rod hit his frontal lobe. What if the rod hit his occipital lobe? So you'll have a varying injury, and you'll discuss those components just like you did for the first component. So that'll be interesting to note, because there will be differences in terms of where the rod actually hit and where the rod may have possibly hit, and what differences would you have seen throughout Phoenix Gage's personality and behavior. Then there's a section on neurobiology. So this section is the location where you identify and explain the functions of the area affected by the actual and alternate injuries. So you'll talk about the impact the trauma had on this frontal lobe and his behavior and things like that, and back that up with, of course, actual evidence and things from your sources. And of course, you'll have points on your APA presentation and your overall presentation of the assignment. And that's where the photos, illustration, graphs, charts, those come into play. So that is that. And that's basically what I want to talk to you about in terms of this week's assignment. So I want to jump right in briefly and talk about your I'm going to stay with chapter 1. We're not going to touch on chapter 2 this week because, like I said, we had other things to discuss, and I wanted to make sure that I am touching every point. So this week in chapter 1, the main focus is the science of psychology. So when thinking of terms of psychology, what do you think about? Do you think about the definition of psychology? What are the specific approaches? Whether research or ethical research are involved, scientific method. And I know that goes hand in hand, kind of similar with biology. So those two are linked in that way. Scientific method relates to so many things when it comes to statistical things and research and things like that. So those are the main components of what psychology is. So how many of you have an acquaintance or know someone that is a psychologist or is studied in this field of psychology, or maybe a therapist, counselor, whatever that may be, whatever they may look like for you? And just think about how they are as in their specific role. And those of you who do not know someone who is a psychologist or has any idea of someone that is within the psychology field, just think about what the impact of psychology has on your that person in terms of the differing factors of someone who may be more involved in psychology and someone who may not be. And lastly, where did your idea of psychology come from? Was it from school? Was it from your family? Was it from maybe a TV show that you may watch? Specifically, ones that come to mind are, when it comes to psychological thrillers and things like that, mind hunters and things like that. Is that where you find your idea of what psychology looks like? But it's just something to think about in terms of your viewpoints and your thought process in terms of where psychology developed within your mind. So the main area of focus, of course, is the definition. So psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. So when you break down that definition, you think of scientific methods. So you think of specific rationale, reasons, research, and things tied to how we understand and we recognize what psychology is today. So specifically for mental health and bipolar and depression, how these scientists get these numbers in terms of 1 out of 4 people in America will be clinically depressed. How do they get these numbers? Of course, they research and they do studies and they do tests and analyze data and things like that. But also they do so much more when it comes to scientific methods. They test and they make sure they are able to create methods that will prevent these things from happening. So the scientific piece of psychology is very important because it not only monitors human behavior, but it also monitors, of course, psychology in terms of many aspects like psychological drugs and things like that. What works, what doesn't. So that component is very important for humans alike. Next is behavior component.